wind that prowled the heights of the wall that dawn was not the honest, blade-sharp cold Mance Rayder had come to respect through decades of ranging. It was a weightier chill, a hush before a hammer blow, and even the blue shadows skating over the packed snow seemed to brace themselves, as if the dawn might split and drop the sky on every living soul who dared breathe beneath it. Mance stood in the gap of Castle Black's gate, black wool cloak curling behind him like smoke from a dying campfire, and let the night-blooded air scour his lungs. Around him stretched a ragged semicircle of his people, free folk chiefs in furs that had outlived the goats they'd once sheltered, spear wives whose eyes were winter stars, raw-boned, spear-thrust lads, trembling for fear the name Kneeler might cling to them forever. Might cling to them forever. They had marched 1,000 leagues on frost-burned feet because he had promised them a new world. Now the new world lay on the far side of an oath that tasted like chains. Beyond the ice bridge, armored ranks of Baratheon men glinted dull bronze in the young light, their stag's head banners hanging limp in the stillness. Torches hissed at posted intervals, a thin red line meant to keep two armies from flinching into slaughter. Stannis Baratheon, the king who would not break, waited beside a standard cast in black iron, the crowned stag wreathed by the fiery heart of the Lord of Light. Mance saw the flicker of red silk, the sharp crimson of the fiery heart, and tasted bile. Yet the worst taste was not color or smoke. It was silence. Too few ravens croaked at the towers. The wall listened, as if the old ice remembered queens and kings who had come to kneel and instead found death. Jon Snow stepped from the tunnel mouth, black cloak islanded with new snowflakes, long sword at hip. The king awaits Mance. His voice carried a soft ache, as though he feared this day might swallow them both. The king. Mance let the words sink into his chest. He felt his own heart, wolf-quick, hammering at its bony cage. He had sworn once never again to don a crown or kneel before one, but the cold and carrion stench beyond the wall had changed many promises. Thousands of his folk lay rotting in those haunted woods because the realm below had thrown up a slab of ice and called it a border. That border was crumbling now, and the living realm needed every weak breath that still steamed the air. He strode forward. Each step broke a crust of last night's snow, crunch, crunch, like old bones. He could feel the stare of his chiefs, Dallas' sister Val, high-cheeked and wary, Tormund Giantsbane, shifting on thick legs like a bear choosing whether claws or tongue would win the day. The Lord of Bones, Rattleshirt, sneer twitching as though ready to spit on the gilded banners. Mance kept his gaze on Stannis. The king stood rigid, mailed hands clasping the leather of his sword belt. A mailed host might have towered at his back, but the man's manner said he needed neither host nor herald. Stannis Baratheon was an edge, offered, never sheathed. Beside him huddled Queen Selyse, lips thin as frozen river ice, Red Priestess Melisandre a half-pace behind, copper hair catching dawn light like a living flame. Mance closed the last yards alone. Jon halted at a respectful distance, Night's Watch cloak swelling like a sail before dropping flat on his shoulders. The morning smelled of pine-pitched torches, wet horse, and the iron stink of men steeling themselves to see a king crowned twice. Stannis' voice struck like flint on stone. "You come to yield. I come to live," Mance answered, low, careful, "and to see my people live. Your people were mine when I broke the watch you set on Eastwatch towers." Stannis' blue eyes were colder than the wall at night. "You speak for them still, yet you wear no crown. Crowns won't feed children or keep whites from their throats." He let the weight of that truth hang. "If kneeling is the coin to buy a future, I pay." A stir whispered through the free folk and southern men alike. Mance felt each heartbeat behind him, the roiling, sorrow-stained tide of free folk pride, about to drown itself in strange devotion. If he faltered now, if he blinked, they might rush forward and split on Baratheon steel. He went down on one knee. Frost bit through wool and leather, and the whole wall seemed to exhale. "I'm Mance Rayder, born of the free folk, and once crowned king beyond the wall. Do bend the knee to Stannis of House Baratheon, first of his name, rightful king of the Andals and the first men." The old words felt hot on his tongue, a grim brand. He bowed his head until he saw nothing but the hoarfrost sparkling on packed snow. Steel rang. Stannis unsheathed Lightbringer. So the Red Woman named it, though dawn's pale gleam did not sparkle like fire along the blade. "Rise, Mance Rayder," the king said. "Swear me sword and horn. Take my law in place of any you named kingly. Lead your folk beneath my banners, and I shall grant you lands south of the wall, fields to till, woods to roam, and halls to roof you. Break faith, and your life is forfeit." Mance rose. The wall loomed behind Stannis, and for an instant the world seemed reversed. The kneeler towering over the crowned, the outcast offering shelter to the realm. He took the hilt of Lightbringer in both hands. A ritual only, the sword scalded with chill, not heat, and pressed his lips to the cold crossguard. "By ice and fire I swear." A murmur rippled the length of the assembly. On the Baratheon flank, men hammered sword pommels against shields in measured salute. The free folk answered with odd, half-choked roars, unsure if they celebrated survival or swallowed years of hate. Melisandre stepped forward, russet skirts skating over snow. "Blood seals all oaths." Her voice lilted with the promise of distant fires. She produced a small bronze blade adorned with unfamiliar glyphs. "A king's blood pledged, a king's blood bound." Mance stiffened. Behind him, Tormund barked, "No flaming witch bleeds our leader." Jon Snow's hand rose, halting Tormund as easily as hailing a friend. "The oath is sworn. Let words suffice." But Stannis' gaze did not shift from Mance. "Have you the courage to pay her price?" "Courage. I marched 10,000 of my folk through dead things in the night." He drew his own knife, white bone haft, blade chipped but sharp. Without breaking Stannis' stare, he sliced the pad of his thumb. A fat red bead welled, steamed faintly. He closed his fist and flicked the blood to the snow between them. "There. Blood enough." Melisandre's eyes narrowed, but she inclined her head. "The Lord of Light accepts courage when price is honest." She stepped back to her king's flank. Stannis sheathed Lightbringer. "So it is sworn." The days that followed were a slow bleed of old ways. Mance walked the ragged camps raised in the flats south of the wall. Once empty fields where the watch cut sparse timber in summers, now a teeming maze of hide tents, horse lines, cook fires smoldering black. 10,000 children skittered like fox kits among stakes. Spearwives bargained for barley bread at supply wagons flown with black Baratheon sigils. Ravaged clans who had never knelt to stone kings carved driftwood totems and planted them beside lean toss. Half fearful the southern wind would tear the spirits from fresh-turned soil. Every dawn Mance heard new mutters. "We should have fought. We should have broken north again. Let the crows starve on their precious wall." Yet each afternoon he passed pens of salted pork, barrels of red apples, flour stacked higher than a grown man's shoulders. Children sucked marrow from bone, cheeks ruddy for the first time since the haunted forest, and Mance did not doubt. Survival had its own language. In the king's pavilion, a dour gray canvas palace rimmed with lamp hoops, Stannis paced maps of the realm like a blackbird measuring the carcass of a dire wolf. Davos Seaworth, weathered and wary, laid parchments before him. Accounts of what coin might persuade the northern clans, still holding out in broken keeps. Tallies of Baratheon soldiers seasoned on the Blackwater, mixed now with half-starved northern levies. Letters from loyal lords in the Stormlands begging relief from Queen Cersei's turret. Mance studied the maps in silence. Down the neck of Westeros, running the King's Road as if it were a knife cut through supple flesh. He saw holdfast after holdfast, marked in Lannister crimson. "You mean to march the free folk straight for King's Landing?" "I mean to break the lion's teeth," Stannis said. "Their claws are near, but their heart is soft. Tywin Lannister holds the capital, yet he bleeds coin feeding foreign sellswords. His son, the Kingslayer, remains in the west, plugging gaps where Robb Stark carved his wars. I will carve deeper. Your folk will help." Mance traced a road with one scarred finger. "Winter marches with us. Half my people lack iron enough for nails, let alone swords. Spears we have, axes. Many have no shields." "Shields." Davos blinked a sea blue eye. Steel shields slow a man. A wildling at my back with a wood round is worth 10 soft southern hedge knights. Mance grunted. You've never seen a free folk spearwife look at a steel breastplate. It's as if the mountain spat a miracle. We'll forge miracles. Stannis' voice was iron ground against flint. The lords of the Vale sit fat behind stone. They owe me taxes never paid. We will ask, or we will take. And the smithies of the riverlands can feed us iron in barter for lion's blood. Damned. Mance noticed the neat stack of charcoal sketches pinned by bone darts. Fortresses flanked by rivers, watchtowers along the Trident, and limned in bold red, the jagged lion of Lannister. War, maps, Dotomani, plans within plans. Stannis meant not merely to march. He meant to cleanse the south in fire and banner. Mance felt an old thrum in his chest. Once he had dreamed of pulling every Stone King down. But Stone Kings were replaced. The hungry folk remained. He pointed to the neck, thin green stranglehold before the riverlands opened. Moat Cailin still stands ruined, but holds the road. Frey's garrison her towers. Davos nodded. We've reports Lord Roose Bolton has sworn to King Tommen, though some say he yet courts the Iron Throne for titles. We will not be stopped by filth that wears men's skin, Stannis said. Bolton's treasons will end beneath my banner. Mance wondered how many treasons any one king could suffer before the realm drowned in them. On the 15th day, after the kneel, banners gathered like storm clouds. From Frostfang trails came columns of Hornfoot hunters, their feet bound in sealskin wraps dyed blue to hide frostbite. Cannibal clans from the far coast marched under black driftwood standards, some half-starved, others wide-eyed at the windmills of Queenscrown rising south of the Gift. The Thens, bronzed beneath fishernet cloaks of copper rings, strode at the head of their own phalanx, bronze axes polished to sunrise glare. All told, near 100,000 souls massed over 3 wind-scrubbed miles. Warriors, children, ancient grandmothers with eyes like moonlit snow. Jon Snow watched from the rampart walk above the king's road. His brothers of the watch stood silent beside him. Arrows knocked not for battle but habit. Giantsbane's laughter drifted faint as distant thunder. The giant One Weg One Dar One lumbered through a sea of tents, and oxen bolted at the sight. Jon's breath plumed. He had fought 10 whites, single-handed, yet the sight of so many free folk clustered beneath southern banners made his heart dance a slow, uncertain beat. A raven settled on the Merlin, cocking its head at him. Snow, it croaked, voice rattling around the single syllable as if the bird too felt the import of that name. Jon reached and stroked sleek feathers, grateful for a moment of quiet. He could not quell the image burning at the back of his eyes. A march of 10,000 spears moving south. Children wailing behind goat-drawn sleds. Banners of bone and hide brushing the shoulders of Baratheon men trained to catapult pitch at stone walls. He feared what the southern lords would see. Savages come at last to burn their daughters. Below, Mance rode among wagons, face hooded, speaking to each clan in turn. Jon wondered what solace Mance found now that he had bent a knee he'd sworn never to bend. There had been no feast, no songs calling him savior. Only wary eyes that watched every move, waiting to decide whether to forgive or forget their own pledge to him. Snow. The raven rasped again, harsher. Behind Jon, the raised voices of his brothers argued over rations, supply lines, the width of the road. He looked south, where the King's Road dipped into hazy, pine-choked forests. Somewhere beyond those hills sprawled Winterfell, now a flayed man's prize, and farther to smoking ruin where Robb Stark had died beneath crossbow quarrels, while songs hailed another king. The Wildlings marched to break Lannister power. Jon found the spark of vengeance inside him, gutter and flare. 100,000 Wildlings, ragged but fierce, led by a king who would not kneel twice. All turned on the lions who had torn his family. Would the realm call it justice or madness? In King's Landing the Red Keep windows wept candlelight that evening, though sunset lingered pale on the rippled waters of Blackwater Bay. Lady Jocasta Liddon, a minor lady in waiting, whose father mined copper in hills Tywin cared nothing for, knelt before Queen Cersei with a scroll in shaking hands. "Speak," the queen commanded. Her green eyes glittered like bottle shards. "A raven from Moat Cailin, your grace. Sir Enys Frey reports movement north of the neck. Bandits. An army, my queen. 2 armies, perhaps." Lord Tywin raised a hand. The chamber fell stone still. "How many?" Jocasta swallowed hard. "Sir Enys claims near 100,000 spears. Runners swear they wear no sigils known in the south, save Baratheon's stags sewn beside hide banners of bone and frost." Cersei's laugh was quick and bright, brittle glass crushed in a velvet glove. "Tales of bumpkins counting clouds. 100,000 men do not simply appear north of the Twins." Lord Varys drifted near the hearth, satin slippers whispering. "Every whisper from the old stones to White Harbor speaks of wildling hordes gathered on the King's Road, and of Stannis calling banners near the wall." "None." Queen Cersei's face tightened, skin pulling hard across high cheekbones. "My brother burned his fleet and the better part of his claim on the Blackwater. He cannot conjure an army. He has conjured a cause." Varys sighed, hands folded. "And cause draws men as surely as gold, when the gold fails to buy bread." Tywin's face was stone. "A cause conjured by Jon Arryn's bastard host at the wall. The bastard's name is Jon Snow, Lord Hand." Varys murmured. "One hears he kept Stannis alive, and that Stannis in turn now shelters the free folk beneath his banners." Cersei's eyes narrowed. "Savages raping sheep women on our road." "That road belongs to the crown," Tywin said calmly, "and I am the crown's sword arm. Summon Sir Kevan, ready 2,000 heavy horse. We ride within the week. Sir Canos of the Gold Cloaks will double patrols on every gate. And," he fixed Varys with a flinty stare, "I would know when Stannis moves beyond Queenscrown." Varys bowed. "I will set my little birds fluttering." Cersei's fingers plucked at the lion pendant at her throat. "Father, we will send word to Roose Bolton. He must hold Moat Cailin, and to Lord Frey." Tywin's jaw was already tightening. "Bolton will hold, for fear of losing the Dreadfort. Frey will hold for fear of losing his neck. Yet the Riverlands bleed. If Stannis marches with free folk at his back, he means to carve the realm's very belly." The fire popped loudly. Outside the tower window, the city spilled across the hills like 1,000 shining beetles scrambling for purchase on stone. From Queenscrown to the last hearth, the Baratheon host and free folk swarm moved like a slow cloud of storm shadows over early snow. Each night, fires spread across miles of bleak fields, lights new and strange to watchful farmers. Mance set his chiefs to drilling scattershot spear walls, handfuls of thens teaching ragged sons of the fens to lock shields, wargs prowling flank, their eyes ghost bright. Jon rode often at Mance's side, though neither spoke of battles yet to come. Instead, Jon delivered missives from Stannis. Letters sealed with stag and fiery heart, listing stores and new oaths sworn by mountain clans once pledged Stark. Karstarks mustered 500 blades. The clans of the northern mountains sent crannogmen foot to guide the host through bog, fen, and forest. The northern wind seemed to hum with wordless hope. But hope counted in measures of courage and salt beef. The host was too large for any one road. Supply wagons ground ruts so deep the wheels vanished, and more than once a team of Baratheon draft horses sank to the belly in bog water. Children fell sick of southern rot-gut liquor, traded for furs. The thens brawled with Sisterton men over a stolen silver torque. One dawn, Mance supervised the lashing of 2 spearwives, caught knifing a Baratheon quartermaster. That noon, Jon found him staring over a low stone cairn, where they had piled the bodies of 3 infants lost to flux fever. "The South promised us life," Mance said, lips stiff. "But death rides any road." Jon had no solace, only the endless hunger to protect what remained. "Stannis will reach Moat Cailin in 10 days. If Bolton's banners retreat before us, the road to Winterfell opens." "That day." "Winterfell, built from oaths as old as giants." Mance tugged his cloak. "Your father's seat." Jon drew a breath that rasped. "I was his blood, but never his son. Still, the wolves howl inside me." The realm will need wolves. Mance looked south, where wildlings now strung tattered banners beside Baratheon standards, along an entire crest of gentle hills. If I stake my folk on this fight, they must see winter broken, not a new cage. We'll make a world where no cage stands. Mance gave a thin smile. You speak as though we forge new worlds from iron. Yet you know iron bends only under heat. Joan's hand settled on Longclaw's pommel. Fire comes. South of the neck, near the marshy country called the Sedge. Men called bog devils by the phrase, whispered through green hallows, bows tipped with poison. They watched the advance of a swarm so large it seemed the forest itself had grown legs and shuffled south. Atop a tumulus once sacred to forgotten children of the forest, Howland Reed crouched beside his daughter Mira. They fly strange banners, Mira murmured. The stag of Stannis Baratheon. Howland said softly. But these others, skins, bones, and claw, speak of the free folk. Wildlings cannot be tamed. They may not need taming, her father mused. Only direction. Fire breaks when wind is right. Reed's black feathered arrows lay beside him, tips glistening dark with adder venom. Yet if these wild folk truly march against the lions, the Old North might breathe again. He looked where narrow flagged roads threaded mossy stretches. Distantly, bronze armor flashed between trunks. Flickers of disciplined ranks shepherding the unruly horde. Go, he whispered. Though no eyes save Mira's heard. Tell the boys at Greywater. The time to fight for the wolf may come once more. We must choose which tooth to sharpen. Mira slid down the tumulus like rainwater, vanishing into reeds that tasted of brim and brine. In the hill fort of Moat Cailin the damp wind stank of salt marsh and roasting dog. Roose Bolton surveyed broken ramparts, where fallen stones lay slick with greenish moss. Fledigman banners sagged, soaked by morning mist. Lord Ramsay Snow, now Ramsay Bolton, strutted along the battlements in a fox-tea fur cloak, a sneer carving his lip. They say 100,000 of the wild folk come hand in hand with the king who burned his own gods. Roose's pale eyes flicked toward his son. Do they? Tales grow wild in swamps. Wild or not, father, Stannis will bleed. Frey men hold the causeway. We need only shut the gates. There are no gates remaining. Roose touched damp stone, felt the moss crumble beneath his gloved thumb. Should the wildlings swarm these ruins, each stone will break another skull. Dead men only weaken our hand with the Lannisters. Nay. Ramsay's grin was a wolf trap. Give me riders, I will show them reason. You will remain here. Roose surveyed the crop of rusted iron spikes Ramsay had installed, each bearing the skull of a slain ironborn raider. Keep your dogs hungry. Ramsay spat. Hungry dogs must feed. Feed them on fear. Roose's tone was unyielding ice. Remember the dread gate sealed us all once when Andals first tried to break the neck. If Stannis marches with savages, let the neck break him in our place. Men. They watched marsh mist swirl like ghost serpents about shattered causeways. Ramsay licked rain from his upper lip, eyes gleaming as though he scented the copper tang of coming slaughter. Across leagues, in the seat of Dragonstone abandoned too soon, the black stone castle clung to its spur of rock while sullen waves scoured the cliffs. In the ancient throne room shaped as some gargantuan serpent's belly, Melisandre stood before a great iron brazier, flames licking runes in the volcanic obsidian floor. She closed her eyes. Ash-smelling heat caressed her cheeks. Into the coals she cast a strip of gray fur, wolf pelt from one of Mance Rayder's captains. Then a gleaming drop of crimson restacked in a crystal vial, a gift from Queen Selise, drawn from Shireen's afflicted arm. The fire roared higher. Shapes coiled in the flame, lions stalking snowfields, a man with antlers sprouting from charred shoulders, a direwolf pacing a circle of dying candles. Blood of wolves and kings, Melisandre whispered. Show me the hour of the prince that was promised. Flames flared brilliant white, and within their luminous heart, she saw two shadows merge, one crowned by ice, the other scarred by fire. Between them danced a sword of pale light. Its blade wrought not of steel but of living sunrise, and upon the blade glimmered a single droplet of blackened blood. Melisandre opened her eyes to night cool air. The brazier's flames had guttered, save for one thin tongue of orange. In its tremor she saw a crown, melting. A stag turned ravenous, antlers spraying ash. And behind it all, 1,000 voices screaming one name that echoed old as frost. Jon Snow. ... She breathed once, steady as ash settling on embers. When kings bend to winter, she murmured. The night burns. Far away, Jon sat beside a dwindling fire. Around him, the Thens shared burnt dog and salted pine nuts, swapping ribald tales of hearthwives left beyond the mountains. He could not sleep. A rising moon skated through black branches overhead, rendering the host in silver, as though every tent were a ghost shell. Ghost lay at his feet, red eyes watching woods where owls called. Jon stroked the dire wolf's thick fur, and felt the restless tide of paths branching. South to vengeance, north to duty, east to war, west to nights he might share with no one. A soft crunch of frost sounded behind. He looked up to find Val, sister to the late Dalla, queen in truth, though never crowned, standing with hair like pale silk down her shoulders. She carried a clay jug that smelled of snowberry wine. You dream with eyes open. She poured 2 small cups fashioned of horn. Jon accepted. Dreams keep us from freezing, so long as they stay dreams. Val sank onto a fallen log. The king who will not kneel sends your folk to break the war. They're not my folk, Jon said quietly. But Val only smiled. Blood says otherwise. Wolf eyes in a crow's head, and the fire witch thinks you burned once in her god's furnace. She drank, eyes on him over the rim. Jon tasted wine tart as winter rose hips. I trust myself less each day. Trust what you feel when you look at her flames. Then look away. There are things hotter than fire. He felt heat behind his cheeks and cursed himself. Wolves were not meant to blush. Val's hand brushed his. When the day comes, stand where the world can see. A wolf in darkness only frightens children. A wolf beneath the sun can lead. Lead? Jon thought of his brothers of the watch, of vows carved in ice. He tasted another swallow of wine, felt it spark along his spine. Even a wolf must choose which pack to guard. Val rose, cloak brushing his knees. Then choose loud enough for hearts to hear. Kings burn and kneel, worlds end and grow again. Ghost thumped his tail as she vanished into tent shadows. Jon stared after her until the wine cup chilled his numb fingers. Somewhere in the dark, horns of the night's watch called 3 rising notes. Standito, standito, standito. A new day crept over the frost, and with it, march orders. In the pre-dawn hush, Mance broke camp. He rode beside Stannis at the vanguard, where the king's road narrowed between flinty ridges. Ahead, a ragged banner of pale light crowned the east. The air smelled of peat and pine smoke, cold water and distant slaughter. Each hoofbeat told like iron on a crypt floor. Stannis lifted a mailed fist. The host crawled to a halt. A rider approached from the forward scouts, cloak slashed with mud. He dismounted before Stannis, breath misting. Your Grace, the causeway beyond Marshguard is blocked. Freymen in silver blue pikes 3 deep, trenches dug either side. They've raised the lion on their rampart. Stannis's jaw flexed. Numbers. 4,000, maybe 5. Archers behind wicker mantlets. Boltons among them. Mance felt the silent gaze of his own chiefs gather like storm ravens. 5,000 Southron pikemen, trenches, archers, stalemate on a narrow tram stretch. Behind them, 60,000 ragged wildlings, ironclad dens, and fewer than 15,000 seasoned Baratheon Mandatian. A dam of spears, wanting only the courage to break. Stannis' glare bore into the horizon. We march in 1 hour, pikes or no. We break them by dusk. If you march in a bottleneck, pikemen will drink our blood, Mance warned. Stannis turned a night's cold stare on him. Kings do not balk at trenched vermin. Mance's pulse hammered. But kings who wish to rule choose where the vermin drown. The king said nothing for 4 taut breaths. Then, speak your counsel. Give me 2,000 spears, 300 archers, and room to vanish. My folk will show you a path the pikemen have forgotten exists. We will cut their flank, open a wound wide enough for your heavy horse to ride through." Stannis studied him as if weighing stone against bone. Davos leaned from his saddle. "I know this bog country, your grace. Tales say secret trails web the marshes. If the wild folk were born to them." Stannis grunted. "Take your 2,000. Take the archers. If you fail, I will feed your bones to the trench." "Nary." Mance saluted with a fist to heart, turned to find Tormund already shoving through ranks of Hornfoot warriors. They grinned bare wide at the scent of first true battle. As the host began to unfurl, banners rising on dawn wind, Jon Snow found Mance threading reins through frost-kicked mud-dye. Their gazes locked. "Come," Mance said. "I'll need a wolf's nose to sniff the safe path." Jon hesitated, only heartbeat. "My place is with the watch, yet the wall is behind us, and my brothers ride at Stannis' rear." Ghost padded beside him, amber eyes reflecting pink dawn. Jon swung up behind Mance. They kicked horses into the waking marsh and vanished among white fingers of mist curling like old spirits above cold water. Atop his causeway palisade, Sir Aenys Frey chewed nail to knuckle. Dawn painted spear points red, and fog seeped from the bog channels like smoke escaping a giant's lungs. Behind him, Bolton men affixed flaidman banners to sharpened stakes. Aenys muttered, "We hold. They break." Yet the words clanged hollow. He had heard tales of how wildlings fought, the rush of bodies, reckless, screaming, no fear for steel. But he had seen the royal host on the Blackwater too. Baratheon men disciplined, endless. And rumors said they were wed now, savage and drilled alike. His brother Hosting, great as an ox, hefted a pike. 50 pikes. Aenys never broke a horse charge. Pikes like ours sink 1,000 men. "If the marsh holds," Aenys whispered, though the marsh felt restless under plain. Spearmen shuffled, stamping cold. In trenches below, stakes jutted like dragon teeth. Caltrops glinted. All was set. Yet the silence stretched. No rattle of drums, no clang of advancing shields. Only the croak of marsh frogs and a distant wolf's howl that sounded strangely near. Moments stretched tight as bowstring. And then the mist parted. Free folk surged from reeds barely 50 yards left of the trenches, horns blasting raw fury. Painted giants roared. Bone-masked axewives bounded across sucking mud. Arrows whistled like rain. For an instant, Frey lines recoiled. Bolton archers loosed black-fletched shafts. Wildlings fell, but more poured from shadows. A sudden blaze flared behind the trench. Baratheon sappers lighting pitch barrels rolled into the flanks. Palisade timbers cracked into dree. Fire chased up sharpened stakes. Sir Aenys bellowed orders drowned by screams. Wildlings hurled hooked ropes over the burning rail, wrenching gaps wide. Through them burst then shields, bronze pushing steel, as Tormund Giantsbane thundered inside the melee, red beard flaming with sparks. From the bog roads beyond, Baratheon banners erupted, cavalry pennons streaming. Knights of the Stormlands in heavy plate, hooves pounding boards. The Frey pike line, unanchored to trenches now aflame, wavered. Pikes tilted, broke. The first mounted wave slammed home, iron-shod hooves stomping bodies into mud. Aenys glimpsed a black-clad swordsman with a pale direwolf at heel carving through chaos. Jon Snow's blade flashed like a streak of winter sun, each stroke measured, ruthless. Around him, free folk shielded his back as if he were king of their own. When the palisade collapsed in ember glow, Aenys fled. Heavy mud sucked at his boots. He heard horses close behind, the savage war whoop of thens tasting blood. The causeway fell in under the frantic weight of routing Freys, plunging men into fen. Water closed over helmed heads. The swamp swallowed curses and prayer alike. By dusk, marsh mist drifted over a field of smoldering timber, shattered pikes, and bodies half submerged. The Baratheon stags snapped in a cold wind while free folk built pyres for their own. The road south lay open. Stannis Baratheon arrived before night, studied the ruin, and nodded once. He dismounted beside Mance Rayder and Jon Snow. "The neck breaks for no man," Stannis said. Yet you broke it. Mance, mud splattered to the scalp, met his gaze. A man breaks what must break. Stannis looked to the horizon where smoke wandered. Then we march. Winterfell lies ahead. After, the Trident. And then, his eyes found the southern star rising above bogs, the lion's den. Jon Snow cleaned blood from Longclaw. The rippled Valyrian steel drinking the failing light. Within the sword's reflection, he saw 1,000 campfires waiting to be lit along the king's road. Each a step toward a reckoning written in the names of those had loved and lost. Ghost raised his muzzle, and from the distant pines a lone wolf answered. The sound floated over marsh and ruin, cold and clear. All not merely of hunger, but of home remembered, and home reclaimed. And under the echo of that wild song, the greatest host the North had ever mustered turned its gaze south, toward Lannister gold and the promise of dawn burning red on a field yet to be named. Indian. Candelon Esau. Night lay over the drowned causeway like a black sail stitched of mist, but the victory fires still wandered the marshland, stray beacons bobbing above reed-thick pools, their reflections trembling where corpses drifted face up to the moon, on a rise of half-sunk earthworks that had once been a first men grave mound. Mance Rayder watched sparks lift and vanish, ferried skyward on a wind that smelled of salt, peat, and the raw iron tang of uncooled blood. The crackle of burning palisade planks echoed across waterlogged hollows, and every now and then a pike haft collapsed with a hollow knock like a stick beaten on a coffin lid. Exhausted cheer rolled through the camps in scattering waves, laughter edged by hoarseness, celebratory roars that ended as coughs, while the wounded moaned faintly in horseshoe rings of lantern light. Mance's shoulders felt carved of wet stone. The night air needled through gaps in his boiled leather brigandine, easy as memory finding old wounds. He lifted his helm, plain steel, no king's crown, and ran a gloved thumb along the dent the first pike thrust had left near the brow. A half-pace slower, he would have taken the iron through his eye. The thought did not quicken his heart. It merely hummed a dull note of recognition. Battle was always a riddle set to the tempo of blades, and tonight he had answered more by chance than cunning. Behind him, a knot of free folk chiefs ringed a cook fire yawning red in a broken shield. Tormund Giantsbane squatted on a tilting cart axle, shredding salt pork with fingers broad as lizard thighs, while he told 3 spearwives how he had personally snapped a pikeman's shaft, and then used the jagged end to lance 2 others through the belly in one thrust. He punctuated the tale by slapping his knee so loudly the broken axle groaned. Across from him sat Val, cheeks stippled with soot, mending the hem of a child's doeskin cloak, while her eyes flicked to Mance's back between each neat stitch. The Lord of Bones lurked in the gloom beyond fire reach, bone armor soot-blackened, forearm braced in a sling of boiled hide. Even wounded, Rattleshirt's icy stare sluiced the night for slights or doubters. Mance half listened to the laughter, the unspoken doubts curling beneath it, and let his gaze drift to the slope below the cairn. There, an immense hunched shape dozed in shadows. One Weg. Vundar Vun's broad back, sparsely furred and striped with lines of dried blood where quarrels had grazed. Children perched on his sleeping legs like sparrows on a fallen log, whispering contests of who dared poke the giant's foot. The raw innocence of it tugged at Mance's chest worse than any pike thrust. He turned when hoofbeats approached. Jon Snow dismounted, cloak feathered with ash, ghost padding silent at his heel. The direwolf's pale fur had darkened where smoke had soaked in. His red eyes caught each ember spark like twin shards of ruby. Jon's face shone with sweat not yet cooled, and a rivulet of half-dried blood traced his right temple. Someone else's wound, likely. Longclaw remained unsheathed in his fist, Valyrian ripples glimmering against the fireline. "You should clean that," Mance said, touching his own brow in mimic. "You'll scare the little ones worse than the giant." Jon lifted a leather water flask, poured a trickle down the wound. "Better? Better? If the Wildlings can see your face beneath the soot, they'll trust you killed someone important." Mance motioned to a slab of stone beside him. Jon sat, exhaling a long note of relief, edged with guilt. "Too many of ours died storming those trenches," he muttered. "If I'd scouted farther left, we might have found firmer ground and circled the pike sooner. Mance shook his head. If wishes were ale horns, we'd drown Halfhand's memory in them. We took the causeway. Stannis' banners will march south at first light. No Southron host has broken Neckland defenses in 500 years. Jon drank, then offered the flask. Mance declined. Your king wants a council. I know. Jon rubbed a smear of ash from Ghost's ear. But his maesters count wounds and salts, not hearts. The free folk need more than grain scripts. They need victory. That means more than a single breached palisade. Mance gestured toward the field of slack banners. Tonight was a song sung in 2 tempos, ours and theirs. Tomorrow the realm will try to force us into one tune. Singers who can't keep tempo get the rod. Jon traced a finger down Longclaw's Fuller. Stark bannermen are joining by the day. Tall Heart riders were sighted near Flint's Finger. The Umbers might march from Last Hearth before week's end, if they learn Boltons hold the castle by Roos's leave. Mance's lips curled. We will see what an Umber does when he smells Bolton treachery. He stood, stretching spine and shoulders until something popped. Come, if your king wants a council, he shall have 2 leaders instead of 1. The Southerners love to talk of numbers. 2 kings, double the weight. The jest tasted rancid, but he let it stand. They strode past fires where free folk still danced half-naked despite the creeping cold, as if they must prove the marsh damp, the night, and every harm of winter could not freeze stubborn hearts. Jon's Night's Watch brothers kept to their own clusters amid Stannis' main camp. Black cloaks mingling awkwardly with Baratheon mantles, striped gold and black. Tension hummed each time Wildling laughter crested. A Night's Watch archer would reflexively grip his bow, then release with embarrassment at hearing nothing but a bawdy goat herder's song. Stannis' pavilion rose at the bog's edge like a dour lighthouse lamped by scarlet torches. Melisandre stood sentinel outside the flap, copper hair glowing with inner ember light, eyes fixed on the stars turning above the neck. As Jon and Mance approached, she slanted her head. The shift of her gaze made Mance's knuckles itch. Women that sure in their magic had been cast out of a dozen Wildling clans as quick as skin changers. Yet here the Red Woman consulted kings and whispered in the ears of gods as though they were kin. Lord Snow, she greeted, voice silk draped over steel. King Bender. She never spoke Mance's name, as though the syllables might sour her tongue. Red Woman. Mance pulled aside the flap. The interior stank of horse sweat, lamp oil, and parchment sealed fresh with wax. Stannis stood bent over a war table crowded by map weights shaped like iron stags. Davos Seaworth shadowed him, finger stumping the rim of a tin cup. A Karstark envoy idled near the corner, heavy black hair unbound, cloak dusty from hard riding. Stannis glanced up. Rayder. Snow. We tally dead. You will find ours lighter than yours, Mance replied. Free folk know marsh fighting the way wolf pups know moonlight. Yet the then shield wall cracked, Stannis said. Harder bronze and discipline than my Stormlanders. Still, they yielded first. Pikes cut bronze same as steel, Mance said. The thens held until the bog swallowed the first 5 ranks. No man stands when mud chews his ankles faster than fear. Davos tapped a finger on the map. We've prisoners enough to trade if the Freys value second sons. Stannis' eyes remained on Mance. Frey prisoners are maggots bred in greater maggots. My interest is Winterfell. He swept a gauntleted hand across the parchment, where stylized towers flayed in Bolton red. Roose Bolton camps, 3,000 men inside, and claims the rest of Stark lands by edict of King Tommen. But he squats on filth. Harborless, friendless, despised. We march tomorrow. Then now. Tomorrow. Jon echoed. Horses need fodder. Half our wounded still lie on reed beds. Stannis' voice cut sharp. A king who pauses after a breach forfeits its gain. Bolton must not finish fortifying Moat Caelan's sister ramparts. We cross the marsh and strike before he closes Winterfell's outer ditch against the cold. Mance accepted the inevitability with a breath. How many days to Winterfell? 5, Davos said. if the King's Road stays solid. 7. If storms flood the White Knife tributaries. 9. John laid Longclaw across the table edge, the steel chilling the parchment. My brothers garrison in the rear. They can escort the wounded once we clear Neck country. Stannis inclined his head by a fraction. You will lead the vanguard with Rayder and Sir Godry Faring. Giants and heavy horse together. We drive the flayed man into his pale walls. Mance quirked a brow. A giant beside your shining knights, the beast's stride alone will scatter their lines. That is the intent, Stannis replied. Fear precedes surrender. Mance met Joan's eyes. In the younger man's dark gaze lived the ghost of a life neither fully claimed. A brother of the Watch sworn to neutrality, and a Stark by every longing bone. Duty warred behind the pupils like twin wolves tearing at the same deer carcass. The sight twisted something in Mance's chest that might once have been fatherly. We ride at dawn then, Mance said. Pray the dawn likes your banners. The dawn arrived sullen, with a heavy bruise of cloud spreading from the sea, and gusts that rattled spear points like chimes cut from hollow skulls. The host slogged south in 3 columns. Baratheon heavy horse, east near the firmer ridges, free folk center on what passed for road. 4 feet of broken plank, flanked by mud so black it shone blue in low light. And a motley of northern foot and Night's Watch rearguard to the west, hugging pine highlands. Above them, crows orbited like drifting soot, and every time one dived at carrion, men whispered omens. Jon rode beside Mance atop a mottled gray gelding borrowed from the mountain clans. Ghost trotted near one wound's giant strides, the direwolf's white coat already streaked with bog slime. The sun lurked unseen above the clouds, but light enough bled through to gild the endless procession of rawhide banners. Mammoth skulls, tusked boar, triple axe then glyphs, skinned stag hearts, deerwolves sewn by novice hands on bolts of linen too frail for wars. At midday, they reached a narrow isthmus of firmer ground, where an abandoned guard tower leaned like a drunkard, hugging its own shadow. Scouts reported leech-infested pools along every approach, some deep enough to swallow a wagon. Mance halted the center to let the rear guard close. He dismounted, mud sucking his boots halfway to the calf. A sense of being watched crawled his nape. From the tower throat, a flutter of dull red cloth drifted. A torn Bolton banner hung like a flencer's grisly trophy, stained by weather and the piss of 100 frightened ravens. Atop the parapet, 2 heads had been nailed side by side, mouths stuffed with straw d'oie. Southron visages, sleek-cheeked. Likely phrase flung from the retreat. Flies marched across empty eyes, and one head's dark beard bristled with frost where dew had frozen. Bolton's welcome, Torment growled, joining Mance at the tower's base. We break his toy castle round his ears. Jon kept his gaze on the path ahead. Dead men fewer than I feared. Freys flee more than fight. Frey men cut my throat at the twins, Torment spat. Their halls are ripe for giant piss. Mance signaled scouts forward. Rag-wearing spearwives who could melt amid cattails and surface behind enemies like trout hitting a mayfly. They slipped into reeds, south of the tower. He turned to find Davos pulling up, horse blowing steam. Road forks 3 miles ahead, Davos said. East route hugs the White Knife. Faster but open. West skirts bog hills, slower, provides cover. Bolton's riders know the east road, Jon said. Hell set ambushes. Mance rubbed his beard. But heavy wagon trains bog in the west. Pick your poison, arrows or mud. Stannis approached at a trot. We split. Rayder leads free folk west to screen supply. I take horse and giants east, reach last river ford before dusk, set camp on high ground. Mance narrowed his eyes. Giants move slower than your male destriers. Stannis' mouth twitched, something near a smile, though on his face it looked like a scar flexing. Not when a giant runs. Wun rumbled a low note that shivered the pine needles overhead, as if understanding the challenge. Jon stroked Ghost's ruff, weighing the decision. In the end, he glanced at Mance. The east road will need a wolf. So will, Mance agreed. I'll mind the wagons. Just remember, Snow. Even wolves drown if the White Knife rises faster than you reckon. Jon nodded, then spurred after Stannis guards. Ghost bounded ahead with joyous leaps, pale tail flicking bog water like crystal rain. Mance felt something tug loose inside as the young man disappeared into fog. Half dread, half pride. He turned to his own command. "Tormund, you have the van. Spearwomen flank the wagons. I'll ride rear with the thens." He signaled, and the waiting spears shivered into motion. The wet ground slurped complaints as wheels rolled again, and soon the westward column vanished into a tunnel of willow stands, bowed by mist-heavy webs. South of Winterfell, Roose Bolton stood in the feast hall, still as flayed rawhide staring at its own blood. The long boards were set but untouched, platters of sour boar, stale oat bread, congealed onion soup, and joints of goat whose grease cooled to a waxy sheen. Ramsay lounged cross-legged on the high seat, shredding strips of cooked dog thigh with a finger dagger. Each slice he dropped into a silver bowl at his feet, where a half-starved bitch snapped them up with wet gulps. A raven beat at the arrow slit, croaking, but no one moved to unbar the casement. The castle seemed to pulse with unease. Every man-at-arms felt it, though few named it. Winterfell stones, warmed by generations of stark fires, did not love their new masters. Smoke clung thicker. Doors grated. Ravens screamed at random hours, as if harried by invisible claws. Lord Walda Bolton, big-bellied, cheeks florid, shifted beside Roose. "My lord husband, the kitchen spoil half their stores. Without fresh carts from Barrowhall, we shall eat dried turnips by winter's deepest month." Ramsay snorted. "We have horses. A stew pot fits any meat." Roose ignored both. Instead he studied the parchment unfolded on the table. A crude charcoal rubbing of sigils pinned to a dead Frey courier's cloak. It displayed a stag crowned by a fiery heart, entwined with a tangle of stick figures that looked like claw marks. Beneath the sigils, someone had scrawled the number DXAs to indicate strength, then scratched it out and replaced it with many. It was all the scout had lived long enough to write. "They will reach the Barrowlands within 3 days," Roose murmured. "Perhaps 2, if the white knife runs low." Ramsay licked grease from his fingers. "Let them. The more they march, the hungrier they become. Walls feed us. Then bestowal. These walls are not ours by blood," Roose said. "And hungry savages care little for walls." Ramsay stood in a fluid motion, dog bowl rattling. Then loosened their bellies. Mud flattened spears, fire empties bowels. Roose lifted pale eyes. "Fire empties castles also. We cannot spare stores for a siege. If Stannis brings giants..." "Giants burn," Ramsay whispered, grin crooked. "Hotter than horses." He raised his thin knife, imagining a cut. Roose tucked the charcoal map into his sleeve. "See the ravens posted hourly. If the stag breaks our pickets, we retreat to the Dreadfort. Winterfell burned once for wolves. It may burn again for flayers." "Namasa," Ramsay scoffed. "Retreat? I would sooner geld myself." "Save that for the kennels," Roose replied in a tone carved of ice. "Winterfell is a tale, made to be retold. The throne cares for survivors, not martyrs." Ramsay's face twisted through a host of emotions: anger, desire, the savage thrill of disobedience. Finally he bowed, lips sneering even as they formed a smile. "As you say, father. But first, let me send our bastards a welcome." Roose did not answer. He turned, silent as a dying candle flame, and strode from the hall. Behind him Ramsay's laughter crackled like tinder catching. The Baratheon vanguard reached the ford at dusk. The white knife ran low, glimmering pewter under a bruised sky, where purple thunderheads lumbered from the west. Stannis ordered torches ringed across the shallows, and had Melisandre stand vigil on a moss-slick rock, chanting prayers in cadence with the river's hush. When Jon dismounted, water lapped his knees, ice-cold, but spirits soared in every man who glimpsed clear passage where they had feared a drowning trap. Wun bore no torch. The giant strode through mid-current water only to his hips, each footfall sending plumes of silver spray. Knights craned to watch, awe pinching the disbelief from even the proudest faces. Jon could not deny the stir of wonder. To ride beside living myth was to taste a chapter of the ancient songs of the forest. They crossed and made camp on the south bank, a low series of drumlins dotted by gnarled birch. Jon pitched his brother's black tents among Baratheon rows, their stiff uniformity marred by the wildling hides fluttering at intervals. Across the host, dwarfed pine logs already crackled as cooks boiled river water for oat gruel, and armorers hammered dents from steel with rhythmic clangs that rang deep into night. Jon stood watch at first moonrise. The air smelled of distant lightning. He felt each heartbeat echo along the rampart of his ribs, a sensor tuned to dread he could not quite name. The war seemed for a moment to recede, leaving only sound. Wolves howling, men snoring, horses shifting. The river chewing its banks. Footsteps scuffed behind him. He turned, expecting a watch brother. Instead, Melisandre approached, scarlet skirts whispering. Her face glimmered pale beneath the moon, eyes deeper than even the winter sky. "Sir Jon," she greeted, voice softer than usual. "The flames speak tonight." Jon resisted the urge to step back. "I've yet to learn their language. It is the language of becoming." She extended a cupped hand. Within lay a shard of river glass, black as midnight, but alive with pinpricks of red light dancing at its core, as though embers lived behind a mirror. "Dragon glass, from the black cliffs of Dragonstone. Your hand must know its weight." "Oh no." He did not reach. "I carry steel. Steel slays men," she said. "But shadows wear the shapes of men these days. Steel glances off that flesh. Dragonglass drinks it." Jon recalled Sam's tales of the white that shattered when stabbed with black glass. He slowly extended fingers and accepted the shard. It felt warm, not unnatural, but warm like a quiet heart. "What price?" he asked. "Only choice." She brushed her own palm across his knuckles. "Feather light. When the night draws deepest, the Lord of Light will ask whose fire you bear. Yours or the cold's? Choose, and let the blade remember. Me?" He closed his fist. "I made my choice when I swore the watch. Did you?" The question was gentle, terrible. Before he could shape reply, she turned, skirts swirling, and vanished between tents, trailing the faint smell of cedar and ash. Jon stared at the glass until moonlight flared inside it, bright as sunrise. In the western train, Mance's wagons made agonizing pace through fens that seemed to multiply with each mile. Rain began at noon. First a faint drizzle that slicked every plank, then a cold, slanting torrent that chattered on helms like thrown gravel. Oxen bawled at each sucking footstep. Wheels sank to hubs. Mance gave the order to cut new rails from birch trunks, lashing them beneath the wheels with rawhide, transforming carts into crude skids. It worked, after a fashion, but progress slowed to half a league per hour. At one bog's rim, they found the tufts of marsh grass matted by huge prints, half circles punctured by toe knuckles. Younger giants, or perhaps the shadowcats rumored to haunt these deltas. Scouts came back with eyes too wide, whispering of shapes the rain blurred beyond certainty. Mance sent runners to the flanks with horns, calling wargs forward. He trusted warg eyes. They saw the world's shape through the color of hunger. Evening settled thick as bog smoke. The column bivouacked on a low ridge. Fires guttered whenever wind shifted, but huddled cloaks kept partial warmth. Children slept like spilled bundles of furs while adult warriors circled watch positions, singing half-hearted songs about hearths remembered beyond the wall. Only Tormund sang with gusto, teaching Stormland spearmen a free folk drinking chant that replaced every third word with a creative variant of goat. Mance spent the hours pacing. Every past choice circled inside his skull, leaving the watch, becoming king beyond the wall, trusting giants, bending knee, trusting another king. And yet a deeper choice still loomed. To see his folk planted in foreign soil that might never accept them, or to see them die where they stood against lions that could summon armies from 500 years of conquered lands. Before second moonrise, a warg runner, lean woman with eyes rimmed red as if lit from within, skidded into camp. Bolton outriders shadow the east bank. She hissed, voice scratchy from beast song. Dogs first, men second. Skin flappers with their hanging banners. How many? Mance asked. 3 packs, 20 men. Scouting for the main road, likely to harry the southern vanguard. Mance rubbed stubble. Let them watch. Night swallows fools that chase in bogs. The warg's eyes gleamed. Or we swallow them. He considered. Killing scouts meant open acknowledgement of war beyond open field, but scouts would report the host's size and state. He weighed risk on the scale of dawn's uncertain light. They ride hounds? Big as ponies. Red eyes like your ghost wolf. Then we feed them ghost wolf's hunger. He sent the warg back with orders. Silent strike at dawn, no horns, kill dogs first. 20 scouts mattered little, but 20 pairs of hound nostrils could sniff the host for miles. Sleep never found him. By dawn, mist parted long enough for an arrow of pale sunlight, and the warg returned grinning bloody, 2 dog pelts slung across her shoulders like victory sashes. Mance gave her a nod, though the savagery chilled him. War taught different morals each dawn. In the Barrowlands, the East Host found fields of tall grass mottled with burial stones older than Andals. Broken cairns jutted like teeth, and every breeze set the grasses talking. Soft, swirling laughter of ghosts that had forgotten their names. Stormlander knights muttered prayers to 7-pointed stars, but the free folk among them felt eerily at home. To live beyond the wall was to break bread with ghosts nightly. The giant's footfalls left dark impressions in loamy soil. Jon rode alongside Wunwun's shadow. The presence comforted him. An ancient strength, indifferent to small men's schemes. The comfort almost let him forget the shard of dragonglass thumping against his chest, strapped inside his jerkin. At midday, they reached the ruins of an old Stark watch keep, tumbled down but defensible. Scouts reported Bolton outriders circling south but not closing. Stannis called halt, ordered palisade earthworks and concentric ditches dug by night. Giants and free folk would camp outer ring, Baratheon troops within, watch in reserve. Jon joined the diggers, shoveling black earth until blisters sprang on palms still tender from sword hilt. The work soothed, each spade stroke a penance for the blood had spilled. He thought of Sam reading ancient maps by candle in Castle Black's library, and wondered whether Sam might, at that moment, be penning a missive to send south. The realm turned without pause, each choice new in one heart yet old in another. Night fell purple, cold enough to silver every blade's edge with rime. As sentries posted, flares bloomed scarlet on Winterfell's far horizon. The Bolton-lit pyres of farmland cottages burned to deny forage. The flicker painted the low clouds like gouts of dragonfire, and for a moment Jon almost smelled roasted horse. The vision jarred. Dragons belonged to other wars, but the memory of stories told by Maester Aemon colored the night cruel. In his tent, he found Davos poring over a sheaf of letters sealed with Karstark's sunburst. "Lord Crow," Davos said, not unkind. "Your watch sees more ahead than my one eye. Come, weigh these roads." They crouched over maps lit by tallow stub. Davos traced 2 routes, one direct thrust to Winterfell across bare barrow fields, another cunning loop that would swing southwest, threaten the Dreadfort's flank, and perhaps draw Roose from his seat. "We choose morning," Davos said. "King thinks direct spearhead wins honor. I think Bolton plays at Fox." Jon weighed silence. "Bolton is leech, not fox. He will drain any wound until he's sure you're too weak to swat him." Membersaw. "So a spearhead drives deep enough the leech splits," Davos mused. "Or starves." He sighed. "I fear cost. Cost will be paid whether we kneel in front of Winterfell or behind," Jon said. "But Stark lords gather. If we do not strike before Bolton feels their bite, he may do something monstrous. Something meant to break their will before they break his walls." Davos did not ask how Jon knew the heart of a flare. The North knew. The hallways of Winterfell whispered. They parted. Jon returned to the outer ring. Free folk fires burned low to hide glow from scouts. He found Val seated near one, turning a small wooden wolf between fingers. "You carve?" he asked. "No, she said. A child dropped it crossing the ford. I meant splinters. She held it out. The figure's snout was cracked. Jon took it, pressed halves together, warmed the join by palm heat until resin glue set. Val smiled. Your hands heal as well as kill. Only sometimes. He pocketed the wolf and felt dragon glass pressing beneath. Two choices thumped heartbeat for heartbeat, and he could no longer tell which belonged to which future. Storm came on the third night. Lightning stitched the sky, and thunder cracked so close it rattled shield stacks. Rain hammered tents flat, ditches filled, and the earthworks disintegrated into churning pits of ochre soup. Knights cursed as armor rusted before eyes. Giants crouched in man-made trenches like shaggy hills, lashed by silver whips. And in that chaos Bolton raiders struck. They swarmed from southern darkness with dogs muzzled in spiked iron and torches sheathed against the rain, vicious dazzles of flame sparking every time lightning flashed. Their approach might have gone unheard, save for dogs barking like the laughter of old gods. But free folk watchers smelled dog before men. Horns bellowed. Jon jolted from failed sleep and sprinted into night, long claw bare. Rain slashed his eyelids, every blink smeared vision. He glimpsed forms, men in tattered cloaks sewn with pale pink blazons, crossbow quarrels glinting. Ghost materialized, jaws crushing a warhound's throat with a wet crunch. A flaming bolt hissed past, thumped into a tent, set oilskin alight despite the rain. Fire licked outward, hungry as rumor. Jon hacked it down with his cloak while yelling for buckets. But more bolts streaked. Soon 5 tents burned, their contents fueling a bright roar that illumined the melee. In that flicker, he saw Bolton riders galloping along the line, scattering caltrops and hurling clay pots that shattered, spewing foul-smelling pitch onto grass. A spark kindled one patch and a sheet of blue flame erupted. Wildfire. It sizzled in rain, unquenchable. Jon charged, cutting down a rider whose cloak flapped like a skin ripped fresh. The man toppled, helm rolling. Jon recognized the bastardy red hair and mismatched armor favored by Ramsay's mongrel guard. He wheeled to see a second rider hurl another pot. Ghost leaped, hamstringing the horse in mid-stride. Man and beast went rolling into mud, pot exploding green. Thunder devoured screams. In the glow, Jon saw Melisandre raise both arms atop a rock, her voice rising in a tongue older than the first men. Flames licked from her palms, and though wildfire could not be quenched by water, it bent before her chant, splitting to either side like a river parted. Bolton men reeled from the fiery corridor, suddenly torn through their ranks. Behind them one rose, towering silhouette, and roared a sound deeper than thunder. He lifted a fallen pine trunk like a club. Swung once, 2 riders ceased to exist. Pulp and armor alike crushed into the spattered earth. The raiders broke. Panic rippled in their line faster than arrows could follow. Dogs yelped under direwolf fangs. Men threw torches away, fearing glimmers might mark them for giant wrath. Jon rallied a knot of Stormlanders, pursued to the fringe until the last pale cloaks vanished into hammering rain. Out beyond, barrow grass swayed like 1,000 ghost spears come to watch. Casualties were tallied by broken lantern light. 15 wildlings dead, 4 knights, 12 crossbow bolts lodged in the giant's log armor, but no mortal wound. 3 supply wagons lost to fire. Worse, 2 crates of dwindling arrows. Stannis paced among bodies, face-lit corpse pale by guttering torches. He said nothing, but the lines deepening at the corners of his mouth told story enough. When dawn broke, it found the camp smeared in black sludge, tents tattered. Yet banners still stood. And on a ridge south, the survivors erected a gibbet of broken spear hafts, atop which they mounted the severed heads of the captured raiders. The rain washed blood down the pikes into the churned earth. If Bolton wanted to bleed the army, he had merely wetted its edge. Stannis called council before noon. His cloak, sodden, clung like a shroud. Melisandre stood near, eyes fever bright. Steam rose from her rain-drenched hair, as though inner heat repelled the storm's chill. Bolton hides in his ruin, Stannis declared. He sends mongrels by night, we answer by day. Davos argued caution. Our supply is thin, your grace. If we press too fast. Stannis cut him off. Winterfell before first full moon, or we cede momentum to Lannisters marching from the south. Lord Tywin routes his gold cloaks 200 miles north already. Word from scouts near Maidenpool. If we tarry, we fight 2 wars. Mance arrived mud-splattered from the western train, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. We have supplies enough to feed 1 siege, he said, voice rasped. If Bolton expects relief from the south, we deny him walls to hide behind. Burn outer villages, starve his cavalry of forage. Then surround. Stannis nodded. 7 leagues to Winterfell. We march at once. Jon sensed a shifting weight in every present man. No one cheered, too weary for cheer. But eyes kindled. Storm lanterns swelling flame in their metal bellies. War had transformed from rumor to certainty. Now each heartbeat belonged to siege engines already being hewn from the very oaks surrounding them. Ramsay Bolton returned to Winterfell 2 nights later, escorted by less than half the riders he'd led forth. He offered no bow to the guards, only tossed a burlap sack at their boots. A severed dog's head rolled out, its snout carved open to mimic a grin. "Tell my lord father," he hissed. The hounds hungered. Inside, Roose listened expressionless, while Ramsay recounted the failed raid. When finished, silence hung like skin stretched on a flayer's rack. At length, Roose spoke. "You spent dogs faster than men. Dogs bred me victories." Ramsay toyed with a thin, curved blade. "Men stank of fear." "Fear fertilizes revolt," Roose replied. "The North remembers. And fear blossoms into knives turned inward. Let them turn. I'll cut them." Ramsay's grin gleamed wet. "We need allies, not kennel tails." Roose stepped to the hearth where embers settled. "Lord Tywin requires our fealty confirmed in blood. He expects our riders to slow Stannis until Lannister strength arrives." "And slow them we did," Ramsay protested. Roose turned, eyes pale moons. "You stirred a giant, and his fury marches." He produced a sealed letter, broken, ink still wet. "Tywin commands we hold Winterfell 3 weeks. Frey reinforcements move up the Trident. If we fail," he laid a finger on the parchment, "he withholds gold and leaves Dreadfort to Stark vengeance." Ramsay spat into the fire, sparks leaping. "Then we summon the bastard boys, everyone, and hunt giants before they reach our gates. I'll bring you the king's stag's head on a pike and the wildling's cock in a jar." Roose's face flickered with something perilously akin to revulsion. "Summon whom you will. But if your hunt fails again, we retreat east. Better a living leech than a flayed corpse." Ramsay's eyes burned. Yet he bowed. "Ace my lord commands." Outside, sunlight broke through scudding cloud just long enough to light Winterfell's ancient weirwood like a white ghost. Its red leaves shivered. Somewhere among those leaves the heart tree perhaps listened, and perhaps it whispered to ghost walkers in the north. "The flayed man's hour is nigh." Dusk of the 5th day saw Stannis' banners crest a hill overlooking the broad sweep of the winter town. Smoke rose from chimneys. Small folk hurried between stone cottages, haggard faces pinched. The castle itself loomed beyond, squat and brooding. Its rebuilt towers banded in black wood scaffolding. A new palisade of sharpened stakes ringed the outer ditch. Stannis halted his horse. The setting sun cast his profile in gold. "Signal the host. We array before dark." Jon felt his heart slam. The last stage begun. No road back north existed, except through victory or ghostly retreat. He looked to Mance, who stood at the foot of the hill, arms folded. Their eyes met, acknowledged unspoken vow. Whatever lay ahead, free folk and watch, stag and wolf, would carve the tale together or die. Giants advanced to the fore, club logs hoisted. Baratheon lancers formed serried wedges. Free folk archers mounted ridgebacks, rough bows knocked. From the rear supply rose the sound of hammered oak as carpenters assembled mantlets. A siege tower's skeleton already sketched against the crimson sky like spidery ribs. Trumpets moaned. The first storm clouds rolled eastward, bearing the scent of snow. And beneath that bruised sky, the greatest host the north had seen since Aegon's dragons stepped onto its cold soil, unfurled banners for war. wolf, stag, bone, bear, sunburst, each snapping to life on the newborn wind, as though called forth by a god, exulting in clash. Winterfell's gate drums answered, hollow beats inside stone belly, and flayed banners crawled up poles in defiance, dripping light like fresh blood. Jon raised Longclaw, felt its weight connect every choice he had made to this breath. Ghost howled. Across the lines, thousands of throats joined, the sound rolling over fields like rising surf against ancient cliffs. The choir of living things dared night to fall. At that moment, Jon knew no oath but the grass beneath his boots and the hearts that beat beside his own. The North remembered, and soon the realm would as well. Bendika. Snow gusted across the Barrowlands in ragged curtains the night the host finished encircling Winterfell. The storm seemed to pour from the sky's very bones. Flakes as big as peach petals swirling under torchlight, until the dark air blossomed with drifting embers of white. Against that living whirlwind, the castle's massive curtain walls loomed like an ancient beast hunched on the plain, its gray belly studded by hoarfrost and the flickering eyes of arrow slits. Jon Snow watched the free folk, Northerners, and Baratheon men stamp out a ring of pickets, trenchworks, and outer palisade a bowshot from the castle's new stake wall. Giants paced within that ring, each dragging whole pine trunks repurposed as rams and rollers. Thunder of iron-shod feet shook hazy lantern rings hung on makeshift posts. The air tasted of pine tar, wet horse, and the metallic nip of oncoming deep freeze. Somewhere far to the east, wolves sang their own tempestuous hymn, thin and lonely through the swirl. Mance Rayder appeared beside Jon as if conjured by the snow. His bear fur cloak was plastered white and stiff. Beneath the rim of his hood, his eyes burned bright, restless fire in a dead hearth. "Old gods are angry tonight," he said, voice rasping with fatigue and chill. "Or maybe they're just throwing feathers for their own amusement." Jon's gloved hands curled tighter around Longclaw's wolf-head pommel. "A proper storm benefits us more than Bolton. Our tents sit lower than his towers. Wind on those battlements will freeze archers solid. Bolton is a flayer, but he's no fool. He'll keep men indoors until the first horn. Then we'll make the first horn echo before dawn." Jon's gaze drifted to the siege lines. Barely 2 leagues separated each anchor camp along the ring. Between them, Mance's free folk roamed like hungry shadows, while Baratheon and northern infantry staggered beneath bundles of freshly felled timbers. Training time had been a luxury none possessed, yet in every exhausted pivot, Jon saw raw will like rope across muscle, binding old enemies into a single cord. Mance exhaled a plume of vapor. "You smell that?" Jon caught at first only smoke and snow. Then, under it all, a coppery sweetness. Wet blood. They turned just as a Night's Watch runner barreled down the trench approach, limp dragging a wounded arm. His breath whistled through teeth shattered in half by something heavy. "Giants, camp, east line," he panted. "Arrowstorm caught them. We lost one wound's cousin, Oro." Blood bubbled around the words. Jon's heart lurched. Giants died rarely, and each death ripped legend from the world. "How?" The ranger spat a tooth. "Bolton bastards fired pitch barbs from their trebuchet. Set the fur alight. The big one ran until he burned himself blank." Mance muttered an oath that sounded like old tongue, then turned down the slope without another word, snow flaring around his steps. Jon followed, wolf white, pounding behind. The siege horn bellowed 3 mournful notes long. Before dawn, it rolled over the snowy plain, rebounding from Winterfell's high stone and breaking apart high in the storm like hoarse thunder. In its wake came sudden hush. Men pausing mid-task, axes half raised, horses frozen muzzle-deep in hay nets. Then low booming began within the castle. Ram skulls on iron gongs, Bolton camp followers raking iron forks against upended shields, a cacophony built of defiance and fear. Torches flared along parapets, but wind shredded their flames into tattered orange banners. Mance was already striding between pickets when Jon caught up. They crossed icy trenches, where engineers were lashing cartwheel rims to the rims of broken shields to improvise mantlets. Val skidded up from the north flank, braid stiff with frost. "Archers ready," she said. Then spearline fixed behind them. Jon nodded. The swirling snow veiled everything beyond a stone's throw. "No flaming arrows until I call." Bolton can't guess numbers if he can't see silhouettes. A single long horn blast rose from the south where Stannis had encamped his knights. That was the signal. Snow or no, battle kindled. Ziga towers, little more than tall sleds disguised with planks, lurched forward, giant pulled. Banners of bone and stag and direwolf streamed behind as men clung to their sides, axes hooking wooden slats for purchase. The towers looked fragile beside Winterfell's granite, but the snowstorm cloaked them like conspirator cloaks. Bolton archers loosed blindly. Arrows clattered through the air, dull thuds on shields. Occasional screams, where luck found flesh. But the swirling gale turned missiles into serpents without eyes. Many drifted wide or snapped mid-flight. "Aim low!" Jon shouted, climbing the first rank of the western tower to stand just beneath its roof. Snow plastered his beard. His eyes watered from the gusts. He raised long claw and gloved fist. A gleam the enemy might never see. Then slashed downward. From the encampment trenches, free folk slingers hurled balls of ice-packed mud soaked in rendered pork fat. They struck Winterfell's outer stakes, splattering like rotten melons. Moments later, archers touched them with quick spark stones and licks of flame caught across the grease. Greenish smoke whooshed upward, fog rolling into arrow loops. In that smothering haze, one strode beneath the western tower's base, bent his back, and lifted. The entire structure jolted forward 2 yards. Ladders on either flank dropped. Even muffled by snow, the crunch when the first ladder sank against Winterfell's timbers boomed in Jon's chest. He went first, clawed gauntlets sliding for grip, frozen half-rigid. Behind him clambered a dozen free folk spearwives, then 2 Stormlander sergeants and a burly Karstark with an axe so wide it looked like a door plank with a handle. Halfway up, bolts ricocheted off the ladder sides. A whirl buzzed past Jon's ear. Splinters stung. He vaulted the parapet a breath before a second bolt thumped into the rung where his boot had been. An armored Bolton pikeman lunged. Jon's parry sent the pikestaff skittering. A pommel punch knocked the man to his knees. Behind, Mance vaulted, curved sword scything. 2 more pikemen from behind, swift like summer lightning. Shouts erupted. Snow cut sightlines into ghostland shapes at sword's length. Jon turned, slashed, saw ghostly outlines tumble. Distantly he heard giants roar, one or another. Then horns, deeper, from the gatehouse side. "Draw them west," Mance shouted. "Stannis takes the king yard." Jon nodded, signaled. Free folk wound war horns. 1, 2, 3, rising pitch. The sound battered the battlements, echoing in evergreen shadows of storm. All along the parapet, wildlings pressed. Bronze bucklers rang against mailed forearms, while spears stabbed into gaps. Cranagmen frog spears suddenly popped from trapdoors cut in Winterfell's new stake flanks. Frogmen pounding nails into ankles. Bolton men reeled. Jon kicked a fallen Pavis, sending it sliding across snow into a cluster of archers. Another free folk hurled a flask of sour goat milk. Shattered glass sprayed curdled lumps across steel, freezing on contact. Gloves slicked, the nearest archer fumbled for purchase just as a then ex-seawife chopped him at the collarbone. Still, the fight could not last long upon the wall. Moets of boiling pitch hissed below, ready to receive any who slipped. Ramsay's personal guard, yellow-eyed hounds painted on their shields, appeared from hidden doorways, fur-lined greatcoats shedding snow. They fought with curved, butchering blades, quick at parry, quicker at throat cut. Jon braced against crenel stones, bathed the guard's machete strike with the riposte of a high wolf's head blow Longclaw had learned from Corran long ago. Blade met blade. Sparks hissed like red fireflies. The guard lunged again, shrill grunt, eyes flicking in fear. Jon sidestepped, slashed downward behind the leading foot, hamstringing him. His howl was swallowed by wind. 5 paces off, Mance blocked 2 at once, then pivot kicked 1 over the parapet. Jon glimpsed the man fall twisting into the swirling dark. No splash of pitch. Only a fading scream and the blur of white storm claiming him. Sudden horn blast. 2 long, 1 short, cut through. Baratheon? Signal. Jon grabbed Mance's shoulder. Gatehouse hours. How do you know? Stannis code. 2 long, 1 short. Success of primary breach holds secondary. Mance's grin flared wolfish. Then we drown walls in our own victory. He turned, whistled shrill. The sound sliced the gale. Free folk lines pivoted, disengaging. Jon parried 1 more slash, then kicked his assailant back and leapt for a stairwell. Down they plunged, boots hollow on inner steps. The corridor beyond stank of tallow smoke and blood. 2 bodies slumped against a murder hole window, throats pink ribbons. Ahead, a stone corridor curved to a right angle where iron-bound doors had been torn from hinges. Through the breach, Jon found a chaos of broken benches, torches on the floor, and snow blew down from a sundered ceiling panel. And beyond, light, the Kingyard. The Kingyard looked unlike any Stark memory. Where once had been archery butts and stable fence, now towered a ring of fresh stakes, draped with flayed skins. Human, sheep, horse, hard to tell in frost blur firelight. At yard center, a crude wooden platform supported a circular cage fashioned from welded spears. Inside the cage, a prisoner knelt, chained to a stake. He wore the Night's Watch black, and his hair hung in greasy ropes over his face. Jon's breath stalled. Gren? Ed? But no. Too thin. Slide her shoulders. Horns wailed at the yard's far side. Stannis knights advanced in tight wedge, shields raised. Ramsay Bolton himself, furs dyed red as drying blood, rode a pale stallion behind 3 concentric rings of his bastards, each mounted and carrying torches that spat sparks on horsehide. As the wedge crossed half the yard, bolts arced from crossbowmen lining Winterfell's inner balconies. But knights bore steel pavises overhead. Bolts pinged harmlessly. Ramsay wheeled, screaming orders. Hounds were unleashed. 12 massive beasts streaked across the churned snow. A giant roared answer. One surged through a breach in the stake wall, swinging a gate beam as though swatting flies. 2 dogs vanished beneath it, bones snapping like thin reeds. Jon burst from the rubble arch with Mance beside him, flanked by 30 free folk shieldmates. They fell upon the nearest ring of Bolton bowmen. Surprise cut swiftly. Arrows not yet knocked, men dying before they fully understood. Jon ducked beneath a wild slash, planted Longclaw through hauberk rings. Blood bubbled pink in the pale light. He glimpsed the prisoner again. The man had yanked enough chain to lift his face. Eyes bright, mouth gagged with horsehair. It was Theon Greyjoy. Jon remembered a boy strutting across Winterfell's yard in a dirty smile, laughing over archery contests he never won. That boy was dead and deserved it. In his place knelt this ragged wretch, haunted as any living skeleton from stories of the North. Still killing, Jon forced thoughts aside. But a phantom sensation of ice-cold iron bit at his wrists, chains he'd once imagined for himself should the watch ever fall. Bolton's bastards swept wide, curved swords sithing. Ghost leapt across the gap, tore one rider from saddle. The horse bolted, screaming. Jon met Ramsay's eyes across that churning melee. Green, mad, joyful. Ramsay grinned, spread arms wide, almost inviting. A sudden trumpet called from Stannis' wedge. Knights braced, parted. Through their ranks thundered a small ram contraption pushed by crannogmen. Behind it strode Melisandre, her hair a banner of flame in the wind. She carried only a small iron brazier burning bright, despite the gale. Ramsay laughed. "Bring the witch. I've dogs fond of rare meat." "No." Melisandre merely raised a hand. Snow around her seemed to pause mid-air, crystals orbiting her like silver motes. She whispered. Wind howled, louder. The brazier flared, white-hot. Then a tendril of light shot skyward, striking Winterfell's broken maester's rookery. Stone cracked. From the shattered turret, ravens rose in a black fountain, wings beating frantically. They spiraled once, then flew straight west, vanishing into storm sheets. Ramsay's sneer faltered. At that moment, the west curtain wall shuddered. A roar rose. Free folk had set roller rams to work. Ice-swollen timbers cracked mortar joints. A section of wall sloughed like rotten rind, stones tumbling in thunderous cascade. The breach opened onto the grain yard. Bolton troops pivoted to defend, but their right flank collapsed as Mance's free folk poured through the inner arch Jon had cleared. Tormund Giantsbane thundered at their head, bare chest steaming, two-handed axe singing arcs of red spray. The battle folded in on itself. Ramsay's bastards tried to regroup, but found themselves caught between a giant, Stannis Lancers, and free folk berserkers. Within minutes, three-quarters lay gutted or fled behind the great keep. Ramsay spurred his pale horse back toward the keep doors, shrieking for the portcullis. Jon gave chase, boots slipping on ice smeared with blood. Longclaw flickered silver. Yet before he could close the distance, a whistling shape plunged from the parapet above. An ironborn reaver wielding a rust-spotted halberd. The man crashed into Jon, knocking him breathless into banked snow. They grappled. Halberd butt hammered Jon's ribs. His mail absorbed the worst, but pain exploded. He elbowed the reaver's jaw, reversed grip on Longclaw, and drove pommel into temple. The man went limp. By the time Jon staggered erect, Ramsay had vanished through the keep doors. Stannis' call sounded, "Hold." Knights rallied, shield ring tightening around Melisandre and the captured yard. Jon glanced across. Theon Greyjoy still knelt, head bowed, as though nothing around mattered anymore. Mance jogged up, breathing hard. Walls open north. He jerked a thumb. Giants clearing a path to the Godswood. We can flood the inner wards before Bolton regroups. No? Jon's answer came not in words but movement. He pivoted, sprinting after Tormund's echoing war cries. Winterfell's inner ward was a maze of slant-roofed barracks, lumber sheds, and stables half buried by drifting snow. Oil lanterns swung from eaves, casting circles of amber where men stumbled and screamed. Free folk had routed the kennel masters first. Torn collars lay everywhere like broken fetters. Dogs darted, feral and confused, snarling at any who passed. Wun led. Blood and snow matted his shaggy legs. He ducked low to avoid galleries, bashed through walls that dared crowd his shoulders. At the Godswood gate, an old iron-bound oak sodden but still stout, he stooped, planted massive fingers beneath the lintel, and heaved. Hinges groaned. Iron staples popped. The gate tore free with a crack like thunder. Jon and 50 spearmen spilled into the Godswood. The heart tree's white trunk glowed ghost pale, tears of red sap glistening by the thousands. Its face, eyes, nose, mouth appeared carved anew by the storm's knife. Snow muffled the slam of doors closing behind them. Ramsay had sealed the great keep shutters. Now crossbowmen peppered arrows from arrow loops at second-story height. Jon signaled. Shields raised, yet they could not stay penned. The keep dominated the north corner. To reach the inner wall's bailey they must cross open ground. Mance knelt, studying angles. We could fell that elm, use trunk as moving mantlet. Jon nodded. Do it. Tie. While axes chopped, Jon surveyed windows. One arrow loop, wider than others, framed a lantern's glow. He measured distance, then unslung the small coral quiver tied at thigh. He notched a barbed head, gift from the Karstark envoy, and drew. The arrow leapt into storm, vanished. A heartbeat, then a scream. Light wavered behind the slit. Jon knocked again. Below, axes felled the elm with a cracking groan. 10 men muscled it upright, bark slick with snow. They advanced, shielding behind the bulk. Bolts thumped into the trunk, some penetrating inches, but not passing through. 10 yards from the keep, Jon heard chanting above. Not Melisandre, Bolton's maester perhaps, invoking 7 or none. The chant rose, became shrill incantation. Something heavy whistled down. A clay jar smashed at base of the elm, spewing shards and gray sludge that hissed like boiling tar. Smoke billowed gray-green. Men choked, dropped shields. Jon recognized wildfire. He bellowed, "Back!" He grabbed Mance's collar, hauled both into snow, as a second jar shattered atop the trunk. Green flame roared skyward, devouring snowflakes on contact. The elm became torch, men scattering emberfleck shapes into night. Mance rolled, cloak afire. Jon tackled him into a snowdrift, smothered flames. Groans and panicked footfalls receded. Through the crackle rose mocking laughter. Ramsay, leaning from a high balcony. "Come, Crow King. Bring me your pretty blade. I'll trade your direwolf's pelt for a girl's smile." Jon's chest thundered. "Stannis will have your hide." "Stannis?" Ramsay laughed. "Hell die on these stones, frozen stiff enough for you to shove your oaths up his royal arse." Bolts spat. Jon ducked behind a stone basin. Splinters rained. Mance cursed, burns on his arm red and blistering. "We need a new path," Mance hissed. Jon scanned. North side of keep. A sally stair curved under a half-collapsed awning. Only one guard above, glancing at fire show. That way. They sprinted across flagstones, Ghost following silent, as the white falling around them. Jon vaulted railing, climbed 3 steps at a bound. Guard noticed too late. Ghost launched, jaws crushing femur. Jon slung the fallen man's grappling rope, hooking balcony rail above. He and Mance ascended, hand over hand. At the parapet, Ramsay's silhouette still jeered toward Godswood. Jon eased onto stone, feet soft. Mance came silent at other flank, sword point drifting like Winterfell's path. Ramsay sensed movement, half-turned, smile fading. He drew twin daggers, slim curved knives with hilts wrapped in pink leather. Snow blew into his eyes. "My castle," he hissed. "Your grave." Jon advanced. Steel clashed. Ramsay danced quick, blades flicking. Jon parried left, right, slid low to thrust. But Ramsay twirled aside, slicing Jon's sleeve. Pain bloomed along bicep. Mance lunged. Ramsay backflipped onto parapet rail. Behind him, black void opened to snowy yard. Jon and Mance pressed in tandem, steel crossing. Ramsay deflected, retreated along the narrow rail like acrobat. Snow slicked the stone. Any slip meant abrupt flight. He feinted left, hopped aside. Mance pivoted to block escape, leaving Ramsay facing Jon. "Know why I'll win," Ramsay whispered, breath misting. "I love the taste of my own pain." He sliced his forearm purposely, fresh blood-streaked blade. He licked it, eyes wild. Jon felt cold fury steady his heart. "Then you'll feast before dawn." He surged. Ramsay parried left dagger, but Jon's follow-through clipped dagger's tip, spinning it into dark. Mance's thrust came next. Swift, aimed at belly. Ramsay twisted, but blade caught his coat, ripping fur. He lost balance, windmilled arms. Long claws slashed, severing the second dagger at hilt. Ramsay teetered, eyes wide. "For the north," Jon said, and kicked. Ramsay toppled into blackness. Scream, lost in wind. The crunch a second later sounded like winter cracking old ice. Silence settled, broken only by distant horns and the muffled crash of rams at distant curtain walls. Snowflakes swirled around the balcony like slow-falling embers of an extinguished pyre. Mance exhaled, shoulders sagging. "King's dead." Jon wiped blood from cheek. "Pretender butcher bastard." He looked over edge. Ramsay's body lay twisted on stone 30 feet below, arms bent wrong, neck angled unnatural. Dogs sniffed the corpse uncertainly, tails tucked. No soldier moved to retrieve him. A new horn sounded beyond Godswood Gate. 3 short blasts, Stannis code for capture of inner yard. "It's done," Mance whispered. "We hold Winterfell." Jon's gaze drifted to the heart tree rising above the Godswood canopy, its red eyes watching. Snow landed on its branches without melting, as if the old gods themselves paused breath. "We hold," Jon murmured, and felt the words settle like weight across shoulders, yet warming too, like a cloak of fur newly gifted on the coldest night. Dawn crept pale over the broken battlements, painting Winterfell in shy hues of peach and dull rose. Fire still smoldered where siege towers had burned. Smoke curled through arrow slits in lazy ghosts. Bodies dotted the yard. Bolton, free folk, Baratheon knight, dog, a patchwork harvest reaped by steel and ice. Within the great hall, Stannis Baratheon stood before the high seat, lightbringer sheathed, cloak trimmed in rime. Mance, Jon, Davos, Val, Tormund, and Melisandre formed a ragged semicircle. Behind, Karstark captains guarded the Maester Tybalt, who knelt shackled beside Theon Greyjoy. The Maester's chain of brass and iron clinked each frightened tremor. Stannis' voice carried iron. Roose Bolton and his remaining host fled east in the night. Our outriders sight them crossing the shivering sea road. They leave Winterfell to us, but carry word of another war. He unfolded a raven scroll, the seal broken. A roaring lion, wax red. Tywin Lannister summons Bolton, Frey, Florin banners under the gold of the king's peace. They gather at Harrenhal in one moon's turn. A hush thickened. Davos' good hand rubbed his beard. Harrenhal. South enough they avoid our banners, close enough to run at King's Landing if they wish. Or turn north again with double numbers, Stannis said. Jon's eyes sought Mance. Free folk once feared nothing but the wall and the dead inside it. Now new specters rose. We cannot follow south, not half-starved, wounded, with winter thickening. Stannis' gaze flared. We hold Winterfell in the north. Once my queen's supply fleet breaks through the narrow sea ice, grain and salt fish sail to White Harbor, then by cart to here. And until then? Mance asked. Our children gnaw pine bark. Until then, Stannis declared, we share what the north provides, under one banner, my banner. Val stepped forward. Free folk kneel to no lords. Nor do I, Mance said quietly. But surviving storms might teach new dances. Jon's pulse hammered. Memory of chains and vows pressed close. Yet something else too. A dirge carried by the wind, promising colder horrors than any war of men. He spoke. We make peace now, or we die when the others ride. The hall stirred. Even Stannis' expression softened, if stone could soften. Others, Maester Tybalt croaked. Children's tales. Jon strode to the Maester, uncoiled the leather strap from his jerkin, and produced the shard of dragonglass Melisandre had given him. He held it beneath torchlight. The black crystal flickered with internal ember sparks. Children's tales kill men, he said. Beyond the wall I slew a wight of the dead. Fire barely slowed it. Steel shattered. This glass ended its life. Mance nodded. Whole villages fell to them. Children, tales, yes, but dead children walk. Silence deepened. Flames crackled in braziers. Outside, the first crow cawed. Stannis broke the hush. If what you say is true, a wall of stone cannot hold the realm. We require every living sword. Wildling, Stormlander, Northman, Southron. All. Davos rested his stump on pommel. Your grace, unity forged in winter, cannot be undone by golden letters in spring. Stannis looked from Jon to Mance, then to the flayed banners torn down that dawn, piled against the hearth. Then we forge unity here. He turned to Melisandre. Light the pyres, burn the flayed man and the bastard's mongrels. We wash Winterfell clean. Mance flicked a glance at Jon. Won't be clean without wolf banners. Jon stepped to the high seat. The direwolf sigil of House Stark, carved once into backrest, had been hacked away by Bolton axes. Only gouges remained. He brushed frost from the scarred wood, then drew his belt knife and pressed blade point to his palm. Blood welled. He smeared it across the gouges. House Stark still lives. Its blood claims this seat. A hush. Then clatter of spear butts as Karstarks knelt first, then Mountain Clan captains. Tormund bellowed a free folk cheer. Val pressed fist to heart in quiet salute. Stannis watched, eyes unreadable. So be it, Lord Snow, if Lord you will be. I am the Night's Watch, Jon replied. The Watch never claimed lordship, Davos said. Jon closed eyes, felt the weight of ghosts of every brother. Tonight, ghosts ask new oaths. Mance's grin flickered. Make them strong. The living will need them. By nightfall, pyres glowed in the outer ward. Black smoke climbed the dark sky, ribboning up past the broken rookery where ravens still huddled under broken beams. Flames devoured flayed banners first, then poured across the stacked corpses of warhounds, tipping Ramsay Bolton's twisted body into the blaze. Snow hissed, steam smelling of charred dog hair and resin. Jon stood with Ghost at the Godswood, listening. The heart tree's red leaves rustled like distant applause. He sheathed Longclaw, smooth burned fabric across bicep wound. The direwolf nudged his knee, eyes glowing. From behind, soft footfalls. He turned. Val approached, bearing a bowl of thick elk stew. She offered it, and when he took it, their fingers brushed. Warmth spread in that brief touch, traveling farther than the stew's heat. "Winter is long," she murmured. "It helps to eat." He dipped spoon. Steam kissed his cheek. "Thank you." Val's gaze settled on the white trunk. Old gods watched tonight. They will remember. Mammo. Jon swallowed, mouthful tasting of both salt and smoke. So must we all. Snowflakes settled slow, gentler than before. In their hush, he heard scuffling. Theon Greyjoy escorted to the pool's edge by Mance and Davos. Theon sank to knees, hands unshackled. He cupped icy water, splashed face, then stared into the weirwood scar eyes as though seeking pardon. Wind carried his broken whisper, "Forgive me." Jon felt no hatred rise, only weary emptiness. Too many grudges would drown what future might yet be forged. Above, the heavens let fall a fresh crown of white upon Winterfell's towers, dressing rubble, hiding wounds, offering a blank page. Somewhere south, lions mustered swords. East, Bolton limped. But here, for one fragile breath, the north belonged to its own again. Jon spared a last glance at Val, at Ghost, at the faces of free folk and Northmen mingling around pyres sharing stew and ale. He let the warmth settle in chest where winter had long made camp. The cold world had not ended, nor the wars within it. Yet tonight, the living had written a line bold enough for even winter's long memory. And in the hush between falling snowflakes, Jon could almost hear the heart tree whisper, "Soft as new snow, remember?